And so somebody goes into the dark, the natural response is fear, is a threat. And what happens is that if somebody's from however we're all conditioned, it's really difficult, especially for men, especially for spiritual men, because they've got even more tools and are even more badass to actually admit that you're afraid, to actually admit that you're afraid and not try to change it. And that's really vulnerable and really exposing. And that is one of the essential doorways into the dark.
Welcome to the Multiple Truths podcast. We're your hosts, Holly
and Brittany. This is a space where we can come together healing in community, where we share our self-love journeys, insights, and wisdom.
A space with no hierarchy or judgment, fostering love, compassion, and respect, and where we honor our differences. With open minds and hearts, everyone's truth is welcome here. We are in this together. Let's dive into the episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Multiple Truths podcast. You are listening to Brittany today. Welcome. How are you? I hope that you're doing well wherever it is you are listening from, wherever around the world you're from. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a life update before we dive in. So it's summer. I'm filming this right before this episode comes out. Ooh, it's July 7th. It's 3:33. That's my number. And you guys, the other day I got stung by a wasp twice. This wasp stung me twice in a row. And when I tell you the swelling, I got stung on my left butt cheek. I'm not even kidding. It looks like I have a cheek on top of a cheek because I am so swollen. I am so swollen. It's literally the size of a football. Like it's huge. It's like if you're looking, it's probably as big as my head, like maybe bigger. I'm not even over exaggerating. I'm like, what is going on? But it was actually super symbolic. And then I got a third sting. I don't know what bit me. It might have been a spider bite, but not on the back because like I got, I got stung twice on the butt. And then on the other side, so like where my hip flexor is, I got another bite of some sort. And that's also freaking huge. So 3 stings. I think it might be a spider bite. I don't know, but it's 3 stings on the left side, swollen. I have like ice packs just like sitting on to kind of like, yeah, calm it down a little bit. But I know that wasps are very much so about, what's the word I'm looking for? It starts with a P. Perseverance, but also boundaries, like boundaries, setting boundaries. And the universe has been testing me recently when it comes to setting my boundaries. Like when I tell you, they have been really giving me opportunities to implement boundary setting. Let's just say that. And it's beautiful because I know why it's all happening, but it's interesting because like that same day that I got stung by the wasps, I had to like really set my boundaries with someone. And like, oh my God, just super interesting. So I just feel like my physical body is going through some purging right now. But I'm really excited for summer. I have officially stopped my one-on-one readings. I felt called to pull away from them kind of out of nowhere. Well, not really. I've been feeling it for a while, but like the sudden urge to just completely like stop full throttle just kind of came in June. So I was like, okay, I'm going to finish my June readings, and then just jump into, yeah, we'll see, creative mode. Holly and I just hosted our first retreat, which was awesome, which we talk about in one of the episodes. I don't think that episode is aired yet, but one of the episodes coming. Do we talk about it? Maybe we don't. We talk about maybe we filmed an episode right before. I don't even remember. But Holly and I hosted our first retreat, which was awesome. It was really good. So that there will definitely be more of those. So keep an eye out for that. I mean, probably not until next year. We don't exactly know when we're going to do them, but we'll know when we know. I hope that the weather has been beautiful for you guys. I mean, just depending where you are in the world, but in the northern hemisphere where I am, North America, it's beautiful. I'm like looking outside, I'm looking at the ocean. It's hot. Oh, feel like I just gotta crack my neck. It's hot, it's beautiful. I got myself a paddleboard, so you could catch me out on the water. But anyways, get cozy, get comfy, grab your coffee, grab your tea, leave us a review, you guys. It really does help us out. Normally, we ask for that at the end of the podcast, but I feel like not everyone makes it to the end, which is absolutely okay. So, just if you've been listening to us and you enjoy our content, we would absolutely love a review. It's one way to support us. So, thank you. Thank you if you have left a review. It really does mean the world. But without further ado, today I am joined by Scott Berman, and Scott is from Sky Cave Retreats. So, Sky Cave, oh my gosh, I feel like that's a tongue twister. Sky Cave Retreats, Sky Cave Retreats, Sky Cave Retreats. Sky Cave Retreats is an incredibly unique retreat center located in the mountains of Southern Oregon. And just a little side note, it's funny. I actually came across Sky Cave Retreats on Instagram a few years ago. And I remember coming across it and thinking like, "Oh my god, this is in Oregon," which is about like a 6 to 7 hour drive from, Vancouver, which is where I'm at. And I'm like, "Oh my god, like I have to do that." I like felt drawn to it. I really felt drawn to it. So I followed them on Instagram and I haven't done it yet, keyword yet, but I know I definitely see myself doing it. I like it's something that I will be doing in the foreseeable future. Probably within this next year, not like right away, but I see myself doing it in the winter. We'll see. Anyways, I know I'm called to do it. I came across it years ago, followed them on Instagram. Fast forward years later, Scott actually reached out to me on Instagram because he saw my YouTube video on the whole Aubrey Marcus shit. So if you haven't seen that, recommend going to my YouTube. I'm not gonna rehash the whole thing, but he wanted to reach out and he really appreciated my view and my take, and he wanted to lend me some insight just on his journey and how Sky Cave retreats and just like going into the darkness has really shifted his view of spirituality, his view of himself. And he said, "I'd love to have a conversation with you just about, masculinity and the wounds within masculinity and how it's shifted for him and all of these things." And I just really appreciated him reaching out. And I just thought it was so funny because I don't normally check my DMs. Like, I don't check my DMs, but I received the message because I was already following them. Otherwise, like, it goes to my requested and I just don't see them because it's just too overwhelming for me. So I just thought it was such an interesting thread. I was like, no way. Like, I started following this account literally years ago because I was drawn to what they offered. But going back to what I was saying, Sky Cave Retreats is a unique retreat center located in the mountains of Southern Oregon, which is so beautiful, by the way. I've been to Oregon before. Oregon is stunning, 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 stunning. Sky Cave offers private off-grid darkness retreats. Yes, full darkness. It's when your eyes are covered, like everything is dark. It's dark. They offer off-grid darkness retreats where individuals spend multiple days, sometimes even a week, in complete darkness, in silence, and in solitude. These retreats are designed to facilitate deep inner work, clarity, and transformation by removing all external stimulation. Each guest is supported with nourishing meals, check ins, and the space to fully surrender to their own inner process. Scott has been immersed in this work for years, holding space for others and experiencing the darkness firsthand. In this conversation, he shares how his perception of spirituality and self has radically shifted through these retreats, both as a facilitator and as someone who's entered the darkness himself. This is one of those conversations that makes you pause, reflect, and maybe even reconsider everything you thought you knew about healing, awareness, and truth. And let me tell you, it definitely had my mind questioning a little bit as well. So, I feel like my perspectives shifted a little bit just thinking more about it, sitting and having conversation with him. So, without further ado, let's welcome Scott in and let's dive into the episode. Hello, Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, Brittany.
Good. I'm excited to dive into conversation. For those listening, we're not going to dive too much into this piece right now, but for those listening, I posted a video on my YouTube channel about everything that's going on with in the spiritual community, Aubrey Marcus. We're not going to dive too much into that topic today, but as a result of that, Scott reached out to me and he had a lot to share. And I'm excited to dive into conversation because what you shared with me via the voice note was just about healing and how about your journey essentially, and how you realized at one point on your journey you had thought that you were a lot farther than you actually were, which I feel like is so common for everybody, like myself included. And I know that there's still so much more to learn, right? The journey is ever unfolding. So I would just love to hear your perspective on that. And yeah, anything that you have to share with the audience today.
Yeah. I think, one thing that just like the way in which we put people naturally on pedestals,
Mm-hmm.
and then how we crystallize ideas of what spirituality looks like.
Right.
And whether somebody on that pedestal, usually they're not even intentionally doing that. They may be sharing their journey,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. And then the way that we naturally internalize that, and
Mm-hmm.
it becomes like a compass for
Yeah.
us of what spirituality looks like,
Yeah.
or when we're just totally enmeshed in the world, what success looks like,
Mm-hmm.
what is a meaningful experience. And if we really unpack that, usually it's based on cultural standards and norms.
Mm.
Like those things that we find to represent success and meaning
Mm-hmm.
are going to be different across so many different cultures.
Right.
So when we're really exploring kind of going beyond
Mm.
what and how we've been conditioned,
Mm-hmm.
are those things that we look to for signs of meaning, signs of success, signs of worth, signs of
Mm-hmm.
belonging.
Mm-hmm.
They're culturally conditioned, and not that there's
Right.
anything wrong with that, but
Mm-hmm.
just exploring the nature of that.
Yeah.
And then I think when many people turn onto the spiritual path, there's on some level an exposure of this is our culture and this is how they assess meaning and worth
Mm.
and status and fame and money. And that's not it, but it's this.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've really just taken another culture and kind of turned towards that of like, this is what it is,
Right.
but why? And
Yeah.
then we have people who share their journeys and have amazing, profound experiences, and people who are really proficient at speaking or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then how we, in our own way, idealize and romanticize them
Mm-hmm.
and or the journey, and
Yeah.
how we kind of take our the roots of how we initially decided what's good, what's right. I mean, even as a little human,
Mm-hmm.
looking to our parents to confirm and affirm our worth,
Yeah.
and the things that we do to perform for applause, and how
Mm-hmm.
that just carries through unknowingly,
Right.
even when we turn towards an alternative spiritual culture. And now all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden, in terms of maybe, I mean, I think it gets pretty muddled because there's a whole thing of like manifesting wealth in the new age kind of spirituality. There's a sense of like, if you're spiritually evolved,
Yeah.
you should be able to manifest wealth. And
Yeah.
now all of a sudden we've taken a very just capitalistic idea that
Mm-hmm.
wealth and money and power is a sign of meaning, a
Yeah.
sign of power
Mm-hmm.
through wealth, and then we've spiritualized it. And
Yeah.
then we've taken like big peak experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that, those are like, that's how you know you're really doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to dismiss them. They're
Yeah.
deeply meaningful. They're
Mm-hmm.
so powerful and profound.
Yeah.
And do they become another status symbol? Is
Right.
that what we use now
Mm-hmm.
to define our sense of worth and meaning and purpose? And like, I think that those things naturally happen.
Yeah.
And in the spirit of curiosity, are they really linked
Mm-hmm.
to what we know to be most meaningful? And
Yeah.
one of the things that happens in the dark for a lot of people who have been oriented in that way is the darkness is really difficult because it's very simple. And there's
Mm.
not any peak experience that carries one through their time in the dark. It's
Mm.
more an orientation of receptivity, an orientation of softening. It's a very feminine space. And so when someone goes in with an idea of, and everyone has it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really how honest and humble one's able to be of their idea of where they're at and what what their ideal is of how they're supposed to be and how they want to be.
Mhm.
And then that's in contrast with where they actually are.
Yeah.
And when you're in the dark and there's not this big sense of achieving and striving and progressing and accomplishing like you can kind of get in the world when you're doing things, you're really confronted with
Mhm.
where you actually are.
Right.
And that, for most people, especially people who are oriented in the spiritual path,
Mhm.
is really confronting and exposing because we're
Mhm.
not our ideal. It's not necessarily as romantic as we've made it, as we want it to be.
Right.
And there's a lot of ideas that we
Mhm.
have in the way of where we're actually at. And I think a lot of people, myself included, in different ways, when they turn onto the spiritual path, there's a lot of like wanting their self to feel better.
Yeah.
And so there's this sense of wanting to have something, wanting to
Mhm.
get something that's going to elevate our sense of self.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
that tends to, I feel like it mixes in a bit of the kind of capitalistic, very male dominated culture.
Mhm.
Whereas when one really drops in the dark,
Mhm.
they start to touch kind of what's beyond themselves.
Right.
And there's not so much having something to show for yourself because there's so much humility when
Mm.
one's really softening into the space that it's not super self-oriented to have a
Mm.
big experience, to get
Mhm.
something to show for yourself, to
Right.
have these big things.
Mhm.
It's more in the small things, in the
Mm.
receptivity, in the softness, and then something else emerges.
Interesting. I have chills as you're speaking. For those listening, I know I explained it at the beginning about these sky cave retreats that you do. People immerse themselves into the dark. I think it's for three days. I'm not sure if you do longer ones as well. But it's funny. I came across your account years ago. It feels. I'm not sure exactly when, and I thought, oh my gosh, they're based out of Oregon, which is not too far from me. About 8 to 10 hour drive or so. And I'm like, I really am curious to give it a go one of these days. Because everything you're speaking to, it makes me think of, plant medicine journeys. I've sat with the medicine quite a few times myself, and I'm a big plant medicine advocate personally. With that said, I don't believe it's for everybody. All of us have our own unique paths and this and that. And I feel like with plant medicine, we often get these big experiences, and it's easy to associate your worth with that. And I know, like, with me on my path, when I really started my awakening, my ego was growing alongside of it, because the healing work, I was doing the healing work, but there was, I guess, a lot more work to do. And as we were saying earlier, I didn't realize that it was subconscious. And I feel like that space, because the plant medicine space is very unregulated as well, there's lack of integration. It can be dangerous for some people. And this is where we see, I call it a spiritual ego, and we all have the ego, however you want to label it. It's a necessary part of this experience, but it's facing the dark within you. And I feel like a part of the problem too is a lot of us haven't been taught how to go within. We live in a society where we're constantly looking outside of us. So I feel, as you were saying at the beginning, we put people on pedestals, or we're constantly looking outside of us. And I feel like that's because of the world we live in, right? We're taught to look to authority. We're taught to listen to people who have all of this knowledge, all of this experience. So it's easy to kind of look at somebody else that's farther along, and I'm using quotes for those listening, like, they might seem farther along than you because they have more knowledge in maybe an area that you're only beginning to dabble in. So it's easy to kind of look up to those people and think that they know so much more. But again, it's that repetition of a cycle of looking outside of you for the answers, as opposed to listening and tuning in and trusting yourself. I feel that there's a lack of trust within the collective. I think it's a collective wound, essentially. Like, we don't know how to trust ourselves. Um, and I think that's just something that's been perpetuated over the years. So I feel like that's changing, and I feel stuff like this, like your sky cave retreats and, even plant medicine journeys, whatever they may be, it helps you kind of dive within and learn more about those, parts of you. But it can get dangerous, when we start putting people on these pedestals. And, I always say, like, don't put anyone on a pedestal, because they will disappoint you. They're human at the end of the day. We all have the shadow, and to deny that is to deny their humanness. And I just, that's how cults are formed and all of these things. And there, it can just get really, really murky. Um, but I'm curious about going into the dark. If you can speak about that a little bit more. And I love how you talk about the subtlety as opposed to it being a grand experience, because even when it comes to meditation, I talk to a lot of people, and a lot of people get so frustrated with just meditating because it's almost like they have this expectation of something grand that is supposed to happen. And even I myself, like, I'm a medium, I do psychism, and I remember when I first started developing, it's so much more subtle. The communication is so much more subtle than I thought. I was expecting this grand voice, or this, you know what I'm saying? Something to make it so obvious and apparent, but it's so subtle. So I'm just, reflecting on, the mirror based on, what you were kind of talking about with going into the dark. So I'm curious if you could expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah. Um, I'll expand on that. And one thread just on the pedestal was something that was, yeah, just fascinating for me to witness and really gave me an amazing window. Is there was someone who came here, and he had, at the time, the most dramatic and profound awakening of anyone who had come here, and still is one of the few people who have really went beyond themselves into what we are before our personality, before we've been enculturated, before we have our likes and dislikes and all of that. And not that that's better than not, but that was just where he landed
Mm-hmm.
and where he stabilized and totally embodied, and in awe. Like, it wasn't like, look what I got, because when he was there was no I that got anything. He was
Mm-hmm.
just gone in this depth of being. And in the morning and evening, there's check-ins. I go up and there's conversations through the door, through the wall, that lasts 10 to 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And when I would go up, I felt honored just to be with him as he crossed over the days of our conversations and witnessing him dropping. And then near the end, when I'd go up, I felt like it was like, for me, being in the presence of an enlightened teacher who
Wow.
didn't even know what was really happening for them, was just in the total awe and sharing, like, whoa. And so it was quite moving. And then 8 months later, we were at a retreat together. And it was amazing to see how he created an entire persona around it. And he
Interesting.
had taken what he came into that was totally beyond his persona. It was beyond culture. It was
Mm-hmm.
what the more of a non-dual space. And then he built an entire persona around it, and was unknowingly, and not even maliciously or intentionally, but performing
Mm-hmm.
what he knew, what he awakened to, but there wasn't the depth of the resonance in it. And since I was in it with him, when he awakened to what he did and when he was embodying it, which was like so profound, and the transmission of just being with him at that time, some of the nights would just bring me to tears. And what it had me confronting of
Mm-hmm.
things that I didn't see in myself as I was with him, but then
Mm-hmm.
seeing him 8 months later,
Mm-hmm.
to see how that happens, that there was an authentic awakening
Mm-hmm.
and he was truly in it, and then built a whole persona around it that was performing the awakening, but he had made it about himself, and he had kind of lost the real depth of it. And that was
Mm.
just really fascinating. I've heard that
Interesting. Mhm.
happens.
Mhm.
Adrian, who's my other teammate in here, and I'll get in as I kind of touch on what you just asked, weave Adrian in.
Mhm.
She joined 3 years. She joined me 3 years ago in this. The first 2 years was just me. And in the beginning, it was a very masculine, oriented spiritual approach, as that
Mhm.
was all I knew.
Yeah.
Adrian is in her feminine and had a completely different way of orienting within all of this and is incredibly perceptive. And she would, throughout our time together, had shared many stories of how this, even with the teachers she's been with and just seeing it through the years of people having authentic awakenings and then shortly after just creating a whole persona and unknowingly performing and replicating and kind of um, mimicking that awakening into their persona because I mean the experience was so meaningful,
Mhm.
but it wasn't necessarily about the experience. It was what was like what was experiencing it. Like
Mm.
it was the inside out, that thing that we touched that was
Mhm.
so deep from the inside out created an experience, but then now we just replicate and perform the experience
Right.
because that's what gives us meaning in our culture. That's how we're going to be seen and
Mm.
validated and have worth and power.
Mm.
And so to see that in real time, yeah, was quite a thing. And yeah, so to go on with the subtleties in my early days of just being very oriented in a more male dominated spirituality, as I
Mhm.
think most spirituality tends to be.
Mhm.
Most spiritual teachers are men.
Yeah.
Most spiritual practices are kind of male oriented and dominated.
Mhm.
And in my early days, I spent over the course of 7 years, 2.5 years alone, off in the mountains in the wilderness, meditating,
Wow.
chanting,
Mhm.
singing, dancing, screaming, shaking,
Mhm.
and felt quite elevated and
Mm.
was really good at putting myself into ecstatic bliss for hours just through singing.
Mhm.
And somebody mentioned a dark retreat to me in 2012. And my wife and I blacked out our house and we did a dark retreat together
Oh,
for
cool.
5 days.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, that was powerful. Now I want to do it alone.
Mhm.
And so I went back down to Baja. I finished building this little earth bag dome. It was just a 9 foot diameter dome. And I went in for 10 days. And
Wow.
on paper,
Mhm.
I was quite extreme in those days. I mean, I still am, but maybe a little bit more balanced.
Yeah.
And I went in for 10 days unassisted in there. I brought in my food. I fasted for the last 5 days. Um, and on paper, I would have been one of the most qualified, in quotes, people to go into the dark. I had spent years alone. I could sit and meditate on the same rock that I would sit up in the mountains for
Mhm.
10, 12 hours a day. I felt like at that time I was pretty happy and content in that.
Mhm.
And I went into the dark and I was incredibly surprised by how hard it was. Like I was
Yeah.
shocked because I always loved being alone
Right.
for months.
Mhm.
And this was, I was like, I'm missing something. I
Mhm.
don't know what it is. I don't know what's going on, but I'm missing something. How is this so hard?
Yeah.
And I couldn't see it at the time because I was just inside my conditioning. I mean, I still am, but a few veils have since fallen to
Right.
see some other things more clearly. And what I've come to see is that for me at that time, and what we see with not everyone,
Mhm.
but more often than not, people who are deep into spirituality have a harder time in the dark because they have very nuanced and
Mm.
sophisticated ways of controlling themselves.
Mm.
And when you try to
Interesting.
control yourself
Mhm.
in a womb,
It's like
in a space that's not changing,
right.
so like there's nothing to overcome. There's like the spiritual warrior does not thrive in the dark. It completely contracts and is tense and is confronted and has a really difficult time because there's nothing to overcome. There's no trophy.
Right.
Like if there's the warrior needs to accomplish something
Right.
and there needs to be a goal and you achieve and you did it and it's a really masculine
Yeah.
orientation which has its place
Yeah.
in the world.
Mhm.
Maybe it has its place in spirituality, but I'm not sure anymore. And
Mm.
maybe that'll yet is yet to be revealed for me as I kind of witness this through a new lens.
Mhm.
But with there nothing to be achieved or accomplished, there's nothing to overcome. It's a real feminine orientation, and people who have lots of tools that are great for regulating your nervous system, maybe for moving energy, for moving emotion, for manifesting, for like really making things happen.
Yeah.
But in a space where there's kind of seemingly no end,
Mm.
if you're fixated on your experience, if you're
Right.
fixated on your result, you're
Yeah.
going to constantly be managing yourself.
Yeah. It
And
causes
if you're constantly managing yourself, you're like this.
tense, right? It causes that
Yeah.
resistance, which prevents you
Oh,
from
you're resisting.
actually, yeah, going.
Definitely. If you're managing your experience
Mhm.
and you're trying to get somewhere or achieve,
Ego.
underneath that, you're resisting what's right here, right now.
Right.
And so if you're not achieving or striving or accomplishing, like for
Mhm.
someone, if you're not doing anything, you're not
Mhm.
achieving, you're not progressing, you
Mm.
don't have a great, cool purpose,
Mhm.
what are you left with? It's
Right.
usually not something very great or
Mhm.
comfortable.
Mhm.
And that tends to be why you're doing those things. That doesn't take away from like people having a dharma and being on their purpose,
Right.
but how much does that cover
Mhm.
something? And
Right.
most of the time, it does.
Right.
Even like the most righteous, beautiful, philanthropic purpose
Mhm.
can be a cover from some kind of lack because it
Right.
fills somebody, and not that there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah.
This is more for someone who's interested in uncovering and really
Mhm.
seeing the root of what's moving them. And so
Right.
then in the dark, with the subtleties,
Mhm.
it's not a big experience. It's not a
Mhm.
peak experience. I know there's some stuff out there that points to dark retreat being this big DMT experience and you have visions and hallucinations and it's really big,
Right.
and I'd say that doesn't happen for many people.
Mm.
It does happen,
Mhm.
but it doesn't happen how people imagine it to, and when
Mhm.
it does happen for people, actually more often than not people want it to stop because it's
Mm.
taking away from the subtleties and it's distracting.
Mm.
And some people have some really far out cool visions, but it's not the thing. Like when somebody settles in the dark, they come to see that it's more about the quality of being, the orientation, than what's actually happening. Because
Mm.
if somebody's like our culture and most, I mean, all of us in some way, we're obsessed with what's happening because
Yeah.
we're so, even if we're in our interior, there's still like a trying to have it be calm, trying to have
Mhm.
love flow through our heart. And
Mhm.
not that there's anything wrong with that. But what does that point to? What's underneath that is if we're trying to shift, change, fix, heal, awaken, and transform, is
Mhm.
it because we actually believe underneath that we're not there yet and this isn't it? And we
Yeah.
have from somewhere some ideal of
Yeah.
how it's supposed to be. And
Yeah.
so someone goes into the dark
Yeah.
and go on. I'll
No,
pause
no,
there.
I was just as you're talking, it's interesting. The last time I sat with ayahuasca was about a month ago, just over a month ago. I was in Peru, and it was my first time going to South America to sit with the medicine. So I had this expectation, right? I tried to go in with no expectations. I'm human, but I had this expectation that I'm in Peru, it was going to be one of my bigger journeys because I'm traveling all this way, the whole 9 yards. And both ceremonies, I didn't journey, nothing happened. And my biggest, takeaway was, and I knew that it was exactly what it was supposed to be. Um, I was proud of myself for not being so disappointed. It was kind of like showing myself, like, wow, like, good for you for not being so disappointed. But it showed me that there was that piece of me that felt like there was something more to fix. There was something more to fix. And there always is. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, healing is a forever journey.
Sure.
With that said, it's loving and accepting myself fully for who I am right here, right now. I don't need to do anything more to be worthy of love, to be worthy of, X, Y, and Z. And I feel like it's so human, based on our experiences and our environment, to associate and tie our worth to all of these external things. And I feel like, when people get into spirituality, it's easy to, yeah, just kind of like switch it to these experiences or whatever it may be. So just you talking about all of this, it just kind of mirrors my last two experiences sitting with the medicine in a way. But sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I just have like chills as you're speaking about this. So yeah, if you can continue.
Yeah. Yeah, that for a lot of people who come, there's some, obviously that's why they're here. There's some orientation to healing, to fixing, to awakening, to transforming. And for most of us, when there's a way in which while we're here with someone to really unpack and explore that further, as there's a sincere thread in there.
Mm,
Like, we know that there's something more.
mhm,
And
mhm,
like, and to really highlight that part, like in there, in that movement to fix, change, heal, transform, and awaken, we know something. There's something that we know, that there's something deeper, there's something more. But it's also mixed with a sense of lack that we're
mm,
trying to cover, that we
mhm,
want to fix our sense of lack.
mhm.
And then, but it's so mixed, we're blind to
Right.
that, we're actually kind of moving to cover our lack. We're moving to like perform and be this ideal that
Mm,
is totally based on some kind of cultural norm or standard. It's not from the inside out. This idea that when we've awakened and we've made it, love is flowing through our heart all the time,
mhm,
and we're free from fear and anger and sadness. But
mhm.
like, what if that's not true?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, what if it's okay to be afraid?
Yeah.
What if it's okay to be sad
Mhm.
without trying to fix, change, or heal it?
Yeah.
And is there a place
Mhm.
in oneself that doesn't need to be healed? Is there a
Mm,
place in us?
mm,
And and I know that we could take a higher
mhm.
perspective and conceptually understand, yes,
Yeah.
I'm whole, but
Yeah.
like, if we really believed we're whole, would
Yeah.
there really be a movement to fix, change, heal, and awaken? Or is
Yeah.
there a movement to attune to that place in us that's whole,
Yeah.
relax into that place that's whole, and then from there, the healing, awakening, and transforming happens on its own
Mm,
as we're kind of grounded in what
mm,
is already whole. But like,
mhm.
that's obviously easier said than done.
Yeah.
And when we do that, it is so unbelievably confronting,
Mm,
because we're not used to being face to face with our lack, with
mhm.
our fear, with our sadness, without managing it. And
Right.
that is what the darkness invites us into, because
Interesting.
nothing's happening.
Yeah. Interesting. It's so funny. I pulled an oracle card before this, and one of the cards that came out was the card that reads do nothing. It literally just says do nothing on it, which is interesting. And
Nice.
yeah, as you're talking, I'm just reflecting on me and my own journey. And, you're absolutely right. It's one thing to like logically know something, but it's a whole other thing to embody that, and to get your
Mm,
subconscious on board with that. And I feel like there's something so beautiful in, again, like you said, logically we know we're whole and complete, but there's something so beautiful in fully embodying that, like you're just kind of like, yeah, I'm just reflecting right now as you're talking. And I really, myself personally, it's tough. Like as humans, right? We're taught, especially like just personal example with my upbringing, it's like striving for more. You should always have goals, doing better, bettering yourself, all of these things. And, this is not me saying it's not good to want to better yourself, right? But it's easy to get stuck in that cycle of like, I'm a constant project, right? And it's like, I also believe that here on earth, we're meant to experience the polarity, right? It's not just the love and the light. We have the dark and the light, and we labeled it as good and bad, good and evil, so to speak. But I don't necessarily, I think like our words are very limiting. I don't necessarily look at it as good or bad. It's just two energies, and we need both energies to have this experience. But there's a saying like, yeah, with like, are you afraid of the dark? That's something that people just kind of throw around, but there's depth to that so much. There's so many layers to that because, like you said, it's like people. I can only imagine. Like, I just am really wanting to, like, I've already wanted to try this 3-day darkness retreat, but just having this conversation, I'm like, I want to try. I really am curious, just how, what my own
Mhm.
experience would be if I would be, getting caught up in, me being quite spiritual, like trying to let go of that expectation, but like, would it still be there?
Mhm.
Because I won't know until I'm really confronted with that. But yeah, it just really has me thinking, like, when one of your senses are completely taken away, I could only imagine the other senses open up more, um, and what that can bring in. Yeah, my mind is just going. I just feel like there's so many different things
Yeah.
that a person can take away from it if they choose.
Yeah. I mean, on that, like when we take away our visual field,
Mhm.
we rely so much on our visual field for a sense of safety
Mhm.
and boundaries.
Right.
And we don't realize how much we do that until we go into the dark. And so when someone goes into the dark, there is a big dump of melatonin. And so there is a period in the beginning where for some, it tends to be relaxing and like really nourishing and nurturing, and it feels really good.
Mm.
That may last, like someone, when they come here, they go in at night fully into the dark.
Okay.
And so that next day, their first full day, for some people, they nap a lot, they sleep a lot, there's a lot of melatonin. It
Mhm.
does feel relaxing. Not
Mhm.
for everybody. Some
Mm.
people go to sleep that night, they wake up and they're in the space, and that doesn't happen for them. So it's different. But once that melatonin period wears off, or if it doesn't really happen, there is a primal fear of being exposed, of being in the dark.
Mm.
Like if someone, any human, was put in the middle of a wide open meadow
Mhm.
and they couldn't see the edges. And even if
Mhm.
somebody went and they're like, we secured the whole premises, you're
Mhm.
completely safe, you're
Mm.
in the middle of the meadow, and then it's dark and they're left alone.
Mm.
Every single human is going to feel, even if it's
Mhm.
far in the back,
Mm.
some kind of threat. Even
Mhm.
if it's the biggest, burliest, badass man with all the guns and cannons, whatever it is,
Yeah.
he's going to be on guard
Exposed.
because he
Mm.
feels threatened.
Mhm.
Now, that person who's totally on guard is probably not aware that they
Mhm.
feel threatened and scared
Right.
because they're bracing, they're
Mhm.
armored, they've got the strategy, they figured
Right.
out how they're going to do it,
Yeah.
but they're doing all of that because they feel threatened.
Yeah.
And so the same thing happens in the dark. One goes in the
Yeah.
dark, the nervous system's natural reaction to
Yeah.
being totally exposed, to not having boundaries, to
Right.
not being able to like visually be like, I am safe.
Right.
Even if somebody's mentally like, I'm safe, people do it all the time,
Right.
but they start to override what's happening in their body and they use it's mind over matter. It's not
Yes.
really what's
Ooh.
happening. And so somebody goes into the dark, the natural response is fear,
Yeah.
is a threat.
Mhm.
And what happens is that if somebody's from however we're all conditioned, it's really difficult,
Mhm.
especially for men,
Mm.
especially for spiritual men, because they've got even more tools and are even
Mm.
more badass
Mhm.
to actually admit that you're afraid,
Mm.
to actually admit that you're afraid and
Right.
not try to change it.
Yeah.
And that's really vulnerable and really exposing. And
Yeah.
that is one of the essential doorways into the dark. And it
Mhm.
looks different for everyone, like the level of threat, how it comes through people's systems, their
Mhm.
safety strategies, their defense mechanisms, what it actually looks like as they admit the fear and as they move through it. Like there's a wide scale. It looks different for everyone. And
Right.
so, not to paint a picture of how it has to look like, but
Yeah.
there is some flavor of that,
Right.
and that takes someone who's humble, who's
Yeah.
not trying to be a warrior,
Right.
who's willing to soften, who's able to soften. And this is why typically
Yeah.
women
Mm.
or somebody who's oriented in their feminine
Mhm.
drops in the dark and settles into the dark and
Mhm.
discovers completely new ways of being,
Mm.
much more than the masculine. And this
Mm.
completely like shifted my perspective on
Mm,
spirituality as like I saw myself and other men who were like had lots of spirituality, were really strong warriors,
right.
have done lots of hard things, the vision quest, vision fast, all these things, and go into
Right.
the dark, and they're just like they're not able to really connect. And then men who were just more oriented in their feminine, or discover their feminine in there and
Mm,
weren't necessarily oriented but had some humility and
mhm.
sincerity, and and people who had no meditation experience at all. There was one
Wow.
guy who came here once straight off of Wall Street. He's like, I don't like meditating. I don't like the idea of controlling my mind. And in the early days, I was still a little like, all right, we'll see how that goes.
Mhm.
And he went in and he went through that passage of like being confronted with fear and
Right.
anxiety and shame and like all those things, and
Yeah.
kept going because he didn't have an idea. That's not it. It was like,
Mhm.
this is here. I'm here for being with what's here. I don't have to have a peak experience.
Right.
And he passed through that membrane, and he
Interesting.
dropped into stillness for hours and hours and hours,
Wow.
basking in like the delicacies of our being. And he was
Mm.
just in tears for hours. And
Wow.
he came out, and this was a little bit more in the earlier times, and I was shocked of
Mm.
like, and I remember asking Adrian, like, what the hell? Why him? Like, why
Yeah.
doesn't I never had anything like that. And she said, you want it too badly.
Uh-huh. Interesting. I feel like I have yeah, that's so interesting with I keep thinking of even my mediumship development because that was a huge thing with learning to communicate with the other sides is having no expectation. As soon as you want
Mm,
it, you're causing that resistance. Those barriers are coming up and it's tough, right? Because it's like you want something so bad.
right.
And in order to get there, you have to let go of that. I have a couple other questions that are popping to mind. Well, one thing that was popping into my mind was just with men in general. I think the society we live in, right? Men are taught, oh, boys don't cry. You know what I'm saying? You have to be tough. You have to be strong, and men have this pressure to be the protector. You're the one protecting. So it's like when all of that's stripped away, everything of who they think they should be is kind of ripped from them. I can only imagine how confronting that is. And I'm curious, you said that this process for you has really shifted your perception of spirituality. I'm curious if you can speak to that a little bit or give a few ways your perception has shifted.
Sure. Um, I mean, it's definitely changed my perception around strength,
Mm,
and where, I mean, this isn't, I guess it'll tie into spirituality, but I mean, obviously, strength has its purpose
mhm,
in so many places in the world, in survival in the
mm,
world, in achieving in the world, in accomplishing in the world, and maybe like some level of fortitude and perseverance in spirituality. But how most strength, that kind of strength, tends to be like filled out with a sense of tension and
mm,
armor and a hardness.
mm,
I
mhm,
never saw it that way before. I
mm,
saw it as empowered. Even my own kind of quote unquote spirituality that was ecstatic and full and powerful. For me, what I discovered was more an overriding of my nervous system. And I
mm,
was really good at overriding my nervous system with a
mm,
sense of power and confidence, and like it
mm,
lacked the humility, receptivity,
mm,
vulnerability, exposure,
mhm,
and that was quite devastating to see,
mhm,
and still unfolding the different layers of it that I still don't see.
mhm,
And seeing so many people who come through who are like, whoa, like I never thought I could do a hard thing by orienting in softness, by like
mm,
softening,
mhm,
and that was a real strength.
mm,
And that
mhm,
so many people discover that, because the people who go in and they're just like the bulldozer or the
mhm,
warrior, is just like when there's nothing to really overcome,
mhm,
you're kind of just tense.
mhm,
And like I think the way that the spiritual path in the West gets presented is
Mhm.
very much through the lens of Western culture, that
Right.
there's something to accomplish and achieve, which is
Right.
very masculine.
Right.
And so in the dark, it's really those who are able to orient with receptivity, softness,
Mhm.
curiosity, who are able to like actually settle in their body and sense.
Mhm.
And we think of, I mean, I think of like childbirth, which
Mhm.
is an incredibly hard thing
Mhm.
that's not done from a sense of like armored strength. It's
Yeah.
like the softening and allowing the pressure
Yeah.
to have its way.
Yeah.
And I mean, and we think of just biologically, physiologically, like the male sex, like the penis that gets like hard and it's pointing out, and it's the
Right.
powerful that's like extroverted out.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
then the feminine mystery that's like within and isn't
Right.
seen in that way, and how that really when one's really in that feminine or masculine power,
Mhm.
that it really points to a different orientation of going out and going in.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. One thing I always say is I see vulnerability as a strength. Having the ability to tune into your emotions, to go there is not easy. But in the Western world, I think a lot of people, however you identify, are naturally more in their masculine energy. I know I was for years, and it's something I'm still working on. Like, it's safe for me to go into my feminine. It's something that, I'm
Mm,
telling myself, and it's been a journey, let's just say that. But just in the society we live in, it's like do more, achieve, go, 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 take action, and that's just perpetuated in society. So yeah, and I think that's such a good point with how with spirituality in the West, it's still viewed through that lens, and it's like these practices are almost perpetuated. It feels like a distortion in a way, and that's everywhere, given your environment and X, Y, and Z. This episode is brought to you by The Beehive. Holly and I created this online space with such deep intention because we know how lonely and isolating the healing journey can be. And what we've truly come to know is the importance of a safe community that understands you. We've both experienced the power of being witnessed, held, and supported, and that's where true healing happens. The Beehive is a grounded, heart led space rooted in connection, reflection, growth, authenticity, and self love. It's a community built on grounded spirituality, not bypassing, but coming home to yourself through your body, your truth, and your lived experience. While we honor the magic of the mystical, we also know the importance of staying rooted. Inside, you'll find real tools, embodiment practices, and a community of like minded people who get it. It's a safe space where all are welcome, where your wisdom, your struggles, and your growth are honored. If you've been craving a down to earth space to heal, grow, and feel supported, we'd love to welcome you into the Hive. Only $22 USD a month. Link in the show notes to join. We hope to see you there. Yeah, that's why, like, personally, for me, too, even talking about spirituality, and my audience knows this, to me, spirituality is very much so like your own thing. It's like, what does it even mean to be spiritual? Like I know some people who are not spiritual at all, quote unquote, but to me, I see them and I think that they are spiritually spiritual, just innately, just by how they are, their connection to the land, just like how they show up in the world. I think that we've put so many labels on things, like you said, spirituality looks like this, or follow X, Y, and Z. And it's like there shouldn't be any rules. Spirituality should very much so be completely your own thing. And I think that, yeah, it's important to have these conversations to really look into that, to question that.
mhm.
Because otherwise, again, it's like when people get into these positions where we put them on pedestals, it can really stray a person. I don't want to say in the wrong direction, because everyone is right exactly where we're supposed to be, and we're experience whatever we came here to experience. But we have free will, and I could talk about all of that for all day long. But I think it's important to be very mindful of. Yeah, I think that's super fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, another thing on that is like this idea that spirituality is going to give us something like
Mhm.
that we wanted. It's going to make us feel better about ourselves,
Mhm.
because then all of a sudden we're going to be referencing certain things that are going to fill us with this sense of meaning. But due to our culture, we're going to be looking towards these big experiences. And what I've seen when people really drop into the dark
Mhm.
is they really have nothing to show for themselves.
Mm.
They're not trying to have anything to show for themselves. They don't
Mm.
feel special at all. Like
Mm.
every single person that I've
Mhm.
seen drop into the dark, I mean, I'm feeling they're very special from the outside because
Right.
I don't, I mean, we've had close to 600 people come through here. And
Mm.
in the beginning, all I knew was my experience.
Mhm.
And then I see other people and I'm like, whoa, I don't move like that. I don't
Mm.
even have the capacity to move like that. Or like a lot of women who really open up and come into the darkness, like I don't have emotion move through me like that. And so I'm constantly
Right.
blown away and humbled and just like, whoa, that's amazing that
Mhm.
like a human when they really open can move like that.
Mm.
But when somebody's really opened in the dark and have really come into something new, they're not feeling like they're special or like
Right.
I got it.
Yeah.
They're always like, whoa,
Yeah.
this is like one, they're like, this is so simple. Like, I can't
Mhm.
believe how simple it is.
Mm.
And they're also like in the awe of it, like,
Mhm.
because it's not like they did it. It's
Mhm.
like they stopped trying to do it and
Yeah.
then realized something else was here.
Right.
A lot of people say like they realize it's not through their effort. It's the
Right.
first time that people stopped efforting. And
Mm.
all of a sudden they're like, "Oh my god, I stopped efforting." And like I mean, initially they pass through that membrane of lack,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is difficult and somebody really has to be willing to include their lack,
Right.
which doesn't feel like I think in the way spirituality gets positioned is you have spirituality to move through your lack, to do the shadow work so you get rid of your shadows. But it's like we orient here more in like inclusion of like integrating, of being with, of
Mm.
like that it's part of the whole thing
Right.
and what else is
Mhm.
behind it all. And so in the simplicity,
Yeah.
which is the darkness, is
Mhm.
really confronting for
Mhm.
people who want peak experiences. It's very boring.
Right.
And so it's in the receptivity that someone's
Mm.
able to attune
Mhm.
to the subtleties and the delicacies in the
Mhm.
dark and the intimacy that really
Mhm.
brings someone in that. But that and when someone does that, those subtleties and delicacies become big. They
Right.
can become peak experiences in a sense,
Yeah.
but it's not through this efforting. It's not like blowing out our circuitry. It's
Yeah.
not overriding the nervous system. It's this really slow flower that's opening, and it's not like I just want the flower. It's like it just happens.
Right.
And you pointed to vulnerability,
Mhm.
which is definitely an aspect and orientation that really has someone dropping in the dark.
Mm.
And for many people, I know myself included, for me, in my nervous system, vulnerability feels disgusting and weak. Like that's
Yeah.
just how my nervous system feels. I understand it's not really disgusting and weak,
Right.
but that would then be me trying to overpower, like, no, it's fine. I can, but obviously that
Right.
doesn't really work when you're truly being vulnerable.
Right.
And so when I'm moving into vulnerability, I'm usually having to then pass through something in my system to allow myself to feel disgusted, to feel disgusting, and to feel weak, which initially for me, I was not able to do on my own
Mm.
because of how big my conditioning was
Mhm.
around that, how it was overcoupled with
Mm.
vulnerability and feeling that. And so, with some somatic work that I've done and work with Adrienne, who's my teammate here, I remember in a session with her once, we hit something and I was feeling totally exposed and vulnerable.
Mhm.
And I was like, I could just turn, and I voiced this because I just wanted to be honest. I was like, in my interior, I could take a slight turn this way. And I was like, and my whole being I could feel is going to start flooding with the sense of power, and I'll feel powerful again. But if I don't do that and I stay in this vulnerability, it feels really weak and disgusting.
Mm.
She stayed with me in it, and I was able to open in it, but I could see how much for me I have that difficulty in being vulnerable.
Mm,
And with people in the dark in different ways, I see it all the time. And
mhm,
there's some people who are really able to be honest. And recently there was there was a man up there who dropped in really deep, and as he was entering this new terrain and there was an invitation for him to really give in to what was here, to really not try to control it. You're not
mhm,
getting anything. You're just giving into what's here. And he was like, whoa, it feels really scary to be so vulnerable.
mm, mhm.
And I think everyone has different levels, different capacities of where it's not scary. But then there's
Yeah,
hits a certain point where you're so exposed, your system
yeah,
is like, this isn't safe.
yeah,
And to sometimes having that co-regulative support
right.
is what some people need, and everyone's different, but
Yeah,
just that exploration into vulnerability when you're not moving into it to get something.
right.
And that's
Yeah,
just not how we orient in our world. And typically, even spiritually, you're doing
yeah,
it to get something.
right. Yeah.
And one of the other things you pointed to is just talking about spirituality and people who don't consider themselves spiritual,
Mhm,
or
mhm,
and I think that's been another thing that's really shifted for me,
mhm,
is what I've seen is the people, and again, not all the time, but
mhm,
more often than not, people who have a spiritual personality and they've been into spirituality for a while, and they, and again, I fit into that historically,
mhm,
have a more difficult time in the dark. They have a
mhm,
lot more filters to move through. They have a lot more hidden, nuanced, sophisticated mechanisms for
mhm,
managing themselves and overcoming and transforming.
mm,
But underneath that, they have a harder time touching the lack if they weren't changing and fixing and healing. And there's been so many people here who have totally blown my mind with what they've dropped into, what they touched, these profound awakenings, and they had zero spiritual history, they had
right.
zero spiritual
Mhm,
aspirations, and it was just right there.
yeah,
And they were so deep in what they touched. And there was one person who came, a long time practicing Tibetan Buddhist,
mm,
and was held high in her lineage, and she went in the dark and panicked right away,
wow.
but she had sincerity.
Yeah,
And so and she had a lot of panic, so there was really no way for her to manage it.
right.
But she stayed with it and really came undone in there. And what she came to see, she was like, I've been using 25 years of spiritual practice to dissociate, to control
Yeah.
myself.
Whoa,
And at
yeah.
the end, when she really she was able to settle in the dark a bit,
Mhm,
and she settled near the end and dropped into stillness. And she
mm,
was like, I was asking her to just describe what the stillness was like, and she's like, it's warm and nurturing. And
mm,
she's like, I've never experienced stillness as nurturing. It was always cold. And
wow.
so it's just amazing how,
Amazing.
like for me, in my early days in the dark, I didn't realize I was doing this, but I was really good at controlling my mind.
Right.
And I would kind of go into a dissociated state, but
Mhm,
my mind would be quiet.
mhm,
And I didn't realize that I was actually in a hyper controlled state and not actually receptive, because if I was receptive,
right.
I probably would have been afraid.
Right. Ooh, yeah, it feels like because that's why personally, like, I don't like to be associated with new age spirituality. I feel like, and it's okay, people link me in with it, but what I see a lot is people using spirituality as another form of disassociation subconsciously. It's subconscious, and I'm sure I do it as well. I'm not saying I'm not saying I've mastered anything here, because I know that there's still so much more for me to learn on this path. But and it feels it's the ego protecting you at the end of the day. And when you feel like you're doing something that's bettering yourself, it's like your ego has convinced you that this is it, this is the path, this is X, Y, and Z. When, sorry, it's a little noisy today. um when really, it can just be another form of that disassociation. when you were speaking, I was just seeing a mirror, like going into the dark feels like an
Mm,
ultimate mirror. It's like,
totally.
okay, you're here, you're with yourself, and that's it.
Mhm.
That's it.
Mhm.
No tools, no gadgets, just with you and your energy.
Mhm.
Let's see what comes up. And,
Totally.
in your ego, I can only imagine, the panic or what in any other way the ego might want to try to protect you from confronting what's to be confronted. Um, but wow, moving through that sounds so expanding. It sounds life altering. It feels like in the simplicity, regardless of what comes
Mhm.
through. I'm curious if you're willing to share any revelations that have come
Mhm.
through for
Yeah.
yourself or for anyone else.
Yeah. You know, to just digress for a moment on what you touched is, I'd say a lot of times, due to the nature of how mental we are, despite probably how many people would say they're just not, but we really tend to live in our head,
Mhm.
and that tends to be our mechanism of control.
Mhm.
Even most in the Western orientation, a lot of meditation or spiritual practice is a way to control what's happening in our body, as opposed to maybe more of a somatic orientation,
Mm.
which or a feminine orientation of
Mhm.
being receptive
Mhm.
and inclusive and just being with.
Mm.
Is like, so there's check-ins twice a day, in the morning and the evening, and then Adrian does these 2 hour somatic based sessions before someone goes in the dark and when they come out. And more often than not, when I go up, people will be telling me how good they are. I'm good, everything's fine, and they could talk for 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm quietly listening for, I mean, what they're sharing, and a little window of what maybe points to that they may not actually be fine, but how it gets glossed over, but it'll get mentioned in some way. And most of the time, like, they're really believing that
Mhm.
they're fine.
Mhm.
They've unknowingly have managed their experience in themselves.
Mhm.
And it happens all the time that I may ask a question or we may have a little somatic exploration and they're like, whoa, like my shoulders just dropped. I thought I was relaxed, or my stomach just opened. It was knotted and I had no idea. Or
Mm.
tears come, or something in that, how unknowingly
Mhm.
we're in some strategy, in a mechanism, in some kind of way of controlling or orienting that insulates us from what we're really feeling, because like that mirror in the darkness, it's so confronting,
Mhm.
and it doesn't really initially give us a sense of importance. We're not
Mhm.
moving towards anything importance. Being in fear or lack is really by no gauge good in any
Mhm.
way at all, and so it's difficult to really like move into that.
Yeah.
And in the another thing that comes up in the dark is like, what happens if you completely get rid of your gauge of doing it right?
Mm. Mhm.
So much of how we orient in the world in spirituality is this idea of doing it right based on some standard,
Right.
some gauge.
Yeah.
And if you're suspended in eternity,
Mhm.
then like nothing lasts forever.
Mm.
And so, what are you going to move towards if that thing is just also going to come and go? And so, there's this real Ramana Maharshi, who was an Indian sage. One of his sayings was, let come what comes,
Mm.
let go what goes, see what remains.
Mm.
And that really shifts the orientation.
Mm.
Whereas fixing, changing, healing, transforming, and awakening is is this process.
Right.
But like, what remains through it all
Mm.
is it just a different kind of exploration.
Mm.
And so, to answer your question about like the revelations and things that I mean, is one is just like how much in my own conditioning and through my own lens that I exist in, and like as much
Mhm.
uncovering as I feel like I've done. I mean, certainly in the beginning, how much work I thought I had done to really find out how good I was at controlling myself.
Mhm.
And like even now, like there's been a lot of uncovering, but like constantly seeing more and
Mm,
knowing that like there's so much conditioning, there's so many lenses, there's so many ways that we fool ourselves to
mhm.
feel safe,
Right.
that and that there is a genuine like capacity that we just have to actually be exposed and be vulnerable.
Mm,
And really seeing through my own experience and through other people's in the dark how simple
mhm.
it really is,
Yeah.
and how it really takes being willing to include our lack
Right.
to really drop into what's here.
Mhm.
And that I don't like techniques and like all of those things where they can be helpful and they have their
Yeah.
purpose, but where they can also become another crutch or another mechanism
Right.
that has us more insulated from what's actually here.
Mm,
And there was a woman once, and it really was the beginning of me seeing what I was doing in the dark when I started to become aware that I was in a very highly functioning freeze pattern and numb.
mm,
What was a woman went in, she was a mother of 10, really strong, tough woman, spiritually oriented, went in the dark. And when she was, this was in the early days, and when she was in there, I couldn't tell. Adrian was just starting to kind of map out kind of the threat responses that people go into in the dark
mhm.
unknowingly to protect themselves.
Mhm.
But it's really like it's become almost all of our personality is
Mhm.
some kind of way in which we do something that has us, insulated from lack or vulnerability or whatever it is.
Mhm.
I wasn't sure if she was in freeze or if she was just really deep. At the
Mm,
time, I was just like assumed she was really deep. I could tell her voice was really far off. She wasn't eating much. She sounded really soft, but we weren't connecting much.
mhm.
And then she came out of the dark and she told me how amazing it was and how profound and she loved it and all of these things, which were real for her. And then she had her session with Adrian, and Adrian was able to attune to her body, her nervous
Mm,
system, and really, from like a step back, really
mm,
sense what was happening,
mm.
but didn't overtly say that, as that's just not how we orient here at all.
Right.
It'd be more asking questions and supporting, and people from the inside out come to see what they see.
Yeah.
We do our best not to add anything.
Mhm.
And so what she did come to see though was like, holy shit, I am in freeze. And
Mm,
I went numb and dissociated my entire time in the dark.
mm,
I do that at home all the time when I'm
mm,
overwhelmed.
mm,
And she came to see that through that session with Adrian, but didn't see it the entire time she was in the dark, and even came out and like was amazing. And then from that, that really informed us more of what happens when people go into freeze, when they dissociate, what that looks like. And I heard Adrian describing that to someone once, and I was like, holy shit, that's what's happening to me in the dark.
mm,
Exactly what happened to that woman. I
mm,
feel like I'm in some deep, my mind's quiet. It feels like I've kind of likened it to a deep spiritual state, but I've totally dissociated, gone numb, and have gone into freeze. And since then, we see that through different people. That
mhm,
happens in different ways. And they have no idea that they're in it because that's the nature of the mechanism, like it's unconscious.
mhm,
And that really that changed things for me, witnessing her experience, seeing it in others, and seeing it in myself, of how those mechanisms work. And we actually have absolutely no idea that that's happening.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I don't know if you can answer this question, but it's like, how do you differentiate then between, because of course, when that woman, for example, came out, she believed that she had this profound experience. So how do you differentiate that? Like, I guess just really being able to like move through it and sit. Does that make sense how I'm trying to ask that?
Yeah. Um,
And I don't know if you can answer that question, but
yeah, and like, and you know, I wouldn't want to position myself as the authority on it to
Right.
like differentiate. I
Mhm.
mean, I'd say some of my biggest learnings here have been when I failed or when I misattuned. And
Right.
fortunately, there's two of us, so there's Adrian's also here,
Mhm.
and like she's far more perceptive and rests far deeper than I do.
Mm.
And so I do get the feedback at times when I've missed a tune or
Mm.
when I've missed something or was following a thread, and then I could see how that went through my filter. It was something
Mm.
that was stimulating me that I unknowingly glossed over or rearranged in myself.
Mhm.
And so those times are, yeah, I learned the most through that. It's also quite devastating
Right.
because at that point, maybe I think I'm doing really good and then get the rug pulled out from under me. But
Right.
there are ways in which we explore with people while they're in the dark.
Mm.
And so I'd say now, usually, I could tell if somebody is more in their defenses or if they're really
Mhm.
embodied.
Yeah. I'm curious, and I don't know if you could answer this. I hear what you're saying, and that makes sense. And just through experience and working with different people and feeling the energy.
We're interrupting this episode to share something close to our hearts, our virtual healing circles. We have been loving them so much and meeting so many of you incredible people through them. Brittany and I are passionate about bringing people together to support one another and heal in community. We felt alone on our paths for so long, and coming together in community has been instrumental to our growth, and we've both seen the importance in it. We aren't meant to do this alone. In unity and vulnerability, we find strength, courage, and support each other on our paths back to ourselves. Our monthly virtual seminars blend discussions, workshops, and practices to nurture your mind, body, and spirit. Whether seeking guidance, healing, or a listening ear, our gatherings offer a safe, inclusive space for people to connect, heal, and grow. Join us on this journey of healing in community. Together, we can heal, grow, and thrive. Register for the next circle using the link in the show notes. We hope to see you there.
I'm curious how, like, if I were to go in, for example, and
Mhm.
I'm like, how, like, but again, that's me having an expectation, I guess, if that makes sense. If I'm like, how do I differentiate if I'm in freeze or if I'm actually, does that make
Yeah.
sense?
No, it's a great, yeah, I mean, there's things before people go into the dark, Adrian will, like, breaks down, like, some different ways that people tend to go into their defenses, fight,
Mhm.
flight, or freeze, or
Right.
whatever it is, and she'll customize it uniquely to that person too who's there,
Okay.
of like noticing how their system will typically respond in overwhelm. Like
Mhm.
going into the darkness is an overwhelming experience.
Yeah.
People imagine that it's going to be really relaxing and wonderful and beautiful. And they see the videos of people coming out of the dark and they're
Right.
like, it's revelatory. And like, it is, but like, not, those videos are deceiving because it is a peak experience coming out of the dark, and being in the dark's just not. And
Yeah.
so it's different. And so there's different ways that Adrian helps people orient before they go in so they can like, when someone's in freeze in the dark, there's certain things that are happening that they're doing that we're able to prepare people for so they can notice.
Got it.
And then there's the support of
Mhm.
like now what I've been able to attune to and
Mhm.
notice, and questions to ask people to be like, oh, this person is in freeze. I mean,
Right.
and it's constantly building. There's so many different ways that it can look. Like there
Mhm.
was somebody who came a few weeks ago, and this was one where I totally missed that she was in freeze. And it looked different than the last 50 people who had gone numb and dissociated,
Mhm.
happily and unhappily or whatever it was. And it was really, well, yeah, I felt devastated. I
Mhm.
felt horrible that I had missed it just in myself. And we had also built, it added another like um, view of how freeze could work,
Right.
because some people can go into freeze and also fawn, really hard.
Mm,
And so that person may not seem dissociated. They may not, like in certain other questions or ways of how they're being in the dark, like through questioning, because somebody may have a really strong fawning pattern, they're answering me in ways that aren't really true.
mm,
But some people may be really good at fawning, or the way that they put it on, and they actually maybe are even able to like unknowingly, like it fills their body a bit. And like,
mm.
so it's hard, it can be, in this instance it was really hard to tell. Looking
Right.
back in hindsight, I could then see where I kind of went off, or for myself, how I was like, I got caught in like, whoa, she's really responsive and coming along on this journey. But it was really like my own kind of enjoying of
Mm,
someone coming along,
right.
that like I was too much in that stream and not stepped back enough to really notice like, oh, I, and not picking up on some of the other cues.
Mm,
So anyway, that was a really unique um experience.
mm,
But yeah, there's different ways. Like, for example, there was somebody some months ago, and I went up and he was telling me, I'm good, I'm super relaxed, I feel really calm. And just through being with him over the last day and before he arrived, and some of the other things he had shared, my sense was he was dissociated and had gone numb, but
mm,
was actually experiencing himself as relaxed and as calm. And so
mm,
through a little exploration, when I asked him, what's it like to eat? Like, what's it? Then he said, well, I really am not liking eating.
mm,
And so I was like, oh, okay. I think his body's probably locked up and he's not able to eat. But he said, I don't like going over to the table to eat. I
mm.
said, oh, what would it be like to eat in your bed? He's like, that's fine. I could eat in bed.
Interesting.
And so I was like, all right, well, what happened? You don't like going to the bed. So right now, if you just imagine yourself walking over to sit at the eating table, what happens? And he's like, whoa, I feel a lot of fear. I feel afraid. My
Mm,
body's getting really tight. And he didn't even leave the bed. And then so it was clear then, this was more of an extreme example, but it
yeah.
was clear that like he was feeling safe in bed because
Mm,
it was kind of insulated, but it
mhm.
was more a numb kind of like flat safe.
Right.
And so people all the time might be, I feel good and calm. And so one of my questions is like, how do you know?
Yeah.
How do you know that you feel good? What's happening in your body,
Right.
in your felt sense experience, that has you knowing that you feel good?
Mm,
And most of the time, if somebody's like, I'm good and I'm fine, and we explore in that way, all of a sudden they realize that they're actually not good and fine. They're good and fine in their mind because they've got it all controlled and packed in. But once they truly open in their body,
yeah.
or they're numb and they're like, it's because there's no stress or anxiety. I don't
Mhm.
feel anything. And
Yeah.
so that tends to be another kind of like, if there's nothing happening in the body,
Right.
it tends to be more that it's gone numb. And so then we have different somatic explorations that'll bring
Mm,
more of a felt sense into the body, so they can start to, yeah, just be
interesting.
with on a felt sense level what's happening.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like, and I'm noting the time. We'll wrap this up soon, but in society, I feel like people are so disconnected from their bodies. People are so in the mind. I talk about this a lot. We're run by the mind, and I was just, subconsciously, but I was just thinking about this literally yesterday or like the day before out on my walk. I'm like, who would I be? Like, who would we all be without the conditioning that we have, like,
Mm,
because me, like the way I view me, just, going on personal experience, like I've questioned a lot of things in my life, but even with that, and I know I have a long journey ahead of me. I'm like, who would I really be though? Without any of that, who would any of us be? Like, who
mm,
are we? Are we just a product of our conditioning?
mm.
And I was just really thinking about that the other day, which is just timely given this conversation, because I
Yeah.
feel like, yeah, like you said, going in the dark is the ultimate mirror. It's almost like it forces you to, it confronts you with everything that's right here, right now. And yeah, I could see how that would be very scary for a lot of people. Um, yeah, because there's no hiding it. I mean, your body can do everything. It can try everything to protect you from that confrontation.
Yeah.
It feels like, it really reminds me of like my mediumship development, if I'm being honest. Like a lot of the similar, I don't know if strategies is the right word, but it's like the letting go, the relaxing, letting go of the expectation, kind of like going in with an observer mindset, almost like I'm just going to observe. As much as you can. It's easy to say that, to actually do that though is a whole other thing. But to try to be the observer as best as you can. And then when you're faced with whatever, yeah, it just sounds so fascinating. So I really want to give it a try one of these days. I'll have to look into like your retreat date, but it's so funny because literally a few years ago, I remember coming across your page and I thought to myself back then, like, this is something that kind of appeals to me. Like, I'm just curious, just curiosity, like what that experience would be like. And then it's funny when you reached out and I clicked on your page, I was like, oh, this is so interesting. I'm like, maybe it's a little wink from the universe. Like, Brittany, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you should, give this a go because, yeah, I'm used to, like I said, plant medicine, but something like this and something I like to preach all the time, which I know is true, but I'm human. Something I'm working on myself is everything we need is within us, right? We don't actually need like I said, there's a time and place, and you could use plant medicine or these other outside things as tools, but they're not necessary. All you really need is yourself. You have it all in here. It's whether or not you're willing and able to sit with yourself and which is a lot easier said than done, I can only imagine. So with all of that, I'm curious if there's any final pieces of wisdom, advice, or just anything that you want to leave the audience with today.
Yeah. One of the things that we kind of maybe not start off with, but at a certain point in the retreat for a lot of people, one of my questions is what's the most important thing?
Mm,
Like what is most meaningful for you? And it really packs a different punch when you're sitting alone in the dark for like a day and you're just really, but what that opens into is like somebody may say love or whatever it is
mm,
in our daily life if we just ask somebody, but how much of that is really guiding everything that we do?
mhm,
And so like in the dark, like what's most meaningful to you? And somebody may share an experience
mm,
and then we distill it down. Like
mm,
why?
mhm,
What's happening in your body that has you knowing that you've touched something meaningful?
mm, mhm,
And that tends to live inside. There's
mm,
experiences that evoke certain qualities in our body that
mhm.
feel meaningful.
Right.
And then when someone's in the dark, it tends to be something very simple
Mm,
because it's really clear that
mhm,
if this peak experience is the most meaningful thing, I'm setting myself up for
mm,
being miserable because one, I
mm.
don't have it. And two, it's just not going to last that long.
Right.
And so, and it's not, we don't orient here in a way to
Mm,
like tell people those things. I'm more interested in like what's most meaningful to you and why, what's
mm,
happening in your body when you've touched
mhm,
meaning. And then people in there begin to, on their own from the inside out, see that it is through intimate connection in the body that
mm,
they touch meaning.
mm,
And then there's that then becomes the central thing that we kind of drop into. And what's it like to just give into an intimate connection in your body?
mm,
And when you really drop into that,
mhm.
is there an impulse to fix, change, or heal? Is there an
Right.
impulse to be better? I mean,
Mm,
there's right that sincere thread to grow that's
right.
there, but is that the thing that's driving you,
Right.
or is it the intimate connection? And when you've really slowed down,
Mhm,
it's really clear that you only have in this moment you only have one choice, one way to orient, And so if one's really honest with what matters most,
Mm,
if being in an intimate, sincere, honest, humble, loving, accepting, whatever it is for someone, connection,
mhm,
then like, what does it look like right now to be honest to that?
mm,
And why do we
mhm,
leave that to do anything else? And like,
mm,
what's that like? What's happening in our body when we've really left just being intimate with
mm,
what's here?
mhm.
And there's this Zen master, Suzuki Roshi, and one of the things he would say was the most important thing is remembering the most important thing.
Interesting. I feel like you've given me a lot to reflect on today with
Mm.
this, conversation. It's so funny. I literally can't stop thinking of these oracle cards I pulled right before this. Just wanted to get the energy of, I do this all the time. And the do nothing card came out. The slow it down card came out. The shadow work card came out. Um, and which is just everything we're talking about today, just so interesting. Yeah, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you so much for this perspective. I'm excited to share this with my audience, and for those listening, when I do this, because I know I want to. It's something that's been on my mind for a couple years already, or whenever I came off across the page, which I think was a couple years ago. You guys have been open for a while now.
Yeah, 5 years.
Okay, yeah. So it was a few years ago. So I know it's something I'm being called to do, maybe sooner rather than later, especially given this conversation. And I'm just thinking of further, and like that this might even act as further integration for me personally, reflecting on my last ayahuasca ceremony when nothing happened, like, and
Mhm.
integration happens for years and years and years after. It's not like just that's it after the experience. And I'm thinking like this maybe is an opportunity, for more integration, to just really sit with myself, sit with nothing. So for those listening, I will let you know what my experience is like when I do it. I'll definitely chat about it, before and after, and just what happens. And I'll, yeah, be honest with you guys, whether something happens or nothing happens, anyways. Yeah, I'm excited now. I'm excited to look into this and see what and when, it'll align with, what I have going on. But yeah, thank you again so much. And for those listening, I will have, is it okay if I have like the Sky Cave
Yeah,
Instagram and all of that? Okay. All of it will be like linked in the show notes below. So definitely check that out if you're interested. It sounds like such a unique, powerful, transformative experience in the most subtle way, if that even makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, it's noisy here today. I don't know if you could hear it, but there's like cars and trains going by. But yeah, so thank you again so much for your time today, Scott. And for those listening, thank you all so much for listening today. And we will see you next Wednesday. Bye.
Awesome.
As we wrap up today's episode, we want to extend our deepest gratitude for joining us on this journey. Your support does not go unnoticed. If you enjoyed this episode and find value in our conversations, please take a moment to leave a review. Your feedback not only helps us grow, but also allows us to reach more people who can benefit from our community of healing and support. Every review, every rating makes a difference. Thank you for being a part of the Multiple Truths podcast family. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Multiple Truths podcast. Keep speaking your truth and spreading your light. We love you, and we'll talk to you next Wednesday.